guys. So, I'm going to pause my explanation of Dungeons and Dragons to comment on something that I found out yesterday that kind of irks me. Um, John Green's book, Looking for Alaska, got banned in yet another school district, this time in Tennessee. And if you'll remember, I've mentioned this book before, and I was talking about its value as a literary book and how I thought everyone should read it. Well, some schools thought this was a good idea and agreed with me, and so they started teaching it in their schools. Well, some parents skimmed through the book without reading it, noticed one or two things that they didn't like, didn't actually understand what was going on, and complained. And then because a parent complained, the book got banned, which I don't agree with for a number of reasons. So, I have written these reasons out and will read them to you as kind of a commentary and, discussion point on why I don't like this. I was just going to say them, but then I realized talking off the top of my head at 6 a.m. might not be the most articulate and well defended point in my explanation of why I disagree with this decision from the school board in Tennessee. So, first of all, I don't think books that are of literary merit should be banned. If you can go to the store and buy it, you should be allowed to read it. And if parents disagree with their child reading a book, even though I don't like that, I can respect that because it's their kid. However, that one parent should not be allowed to make a decision that affects the entire school district, especially if they haven't actually read the book. They just skimmed through it. Um, Second, the whole purpose of the scene in question, which, okay, I guess I have to explain this to those of you who don't know, but there's a point in the book where there's a physically intimate scene between the two of the teenagers. They're not actually having sex, but they're being very physically intimate with each other. And it is very uncomfortable and very unpleasant for both of them. And they're not satisfied with it, and they're like, this is really awkward, and they don't like it. And it ends very badly because they're both like, this was a really stupid idea. And they don't understand why people do physically intimate things because they're so unsatisfied and it's so awkward. And the entire purpose of that scene is to show the contrast between how unpleasant that physical scene is and how it ends badly, and the deeply emotional scene and the one that follows that's like a very important connection and learning experience for the character. And the comparison is written in such a way so that when you're reading the book, you can't miss the fact that the physical scene is so empty and so negative, and the emotional scene is so positive and is so, like, fulfilling. So, and beyond that, the scene is so awkward and dissatisfying and uncomfortable. I think the only thing that it could do is demystify teens as to, like, instead of saying, oh, sex and physical intimacy is great, it's like, this is really uncomfortable and a really stupid idea. So it would demystify teens to that and discourage them from following suit. Instead of, like, the parents who disliked this book claim, they said that it would open gateway experiences to sex and it would encourage students to have sex, and it's a monkey see monkey do type thing. And so that's ridiculous, because A, they don't have sex, and B, it's really uncomfortable, and C, they're entirely negating the student's ability to think and understand that. So those are my first 2 points. Okay, so my next point is that the article that I read on this being banned suggested that if parents were to be uncomfortable with a scene in something that someone like Hemingway or Steinbeck wrote, the literary value of that author outweighs their discomfort, which I agree with, but I disagree. The statement implies that more modern authors don't have that. First of all, because it denies any modern author the chance to write things of a literary value. I'm pretty sure that people alive can write things that are more than just for entertainment and actually are to make people think and grow and such. Um, and it's not just old authors that can do that. So I think people who've gone to college and studied these authors and write for a living can go and write things of literary value just as validly. Um, and I think it also limits the effectiveness of what teachers can teach, alienates some students, and cuts off the possibility for students to learn or discuss issues that are relevant to them today. Like, you can go and you can read something like The Great Gatsby, or Beowulf, or The Odyssey, or Chaucer, or plenty of great literature. Because I'm an English major and I understand that all this great literature exists, but at the same time, those were written so long ago that some students cannot relate to the characters in the story because they weren't experiencing the same things, and they can't understand that because they haven't put forth the effort into reading. So sometimes you have to make it easy to get people to appreciate literature. You have to make it easy for them to read something. Like, one of the things, if you go to any high school, most of the students don't actually read the books. They just get on Spark Notes or just listen to the class discussions and take the tests on that. So they're not getting the message and the impact of the literature. And I think one of the reasons is because they're not using some modern books. I wouldn't say just use modern books. You need to go study things like Gatsby and Beowulf and the Odyssey. Like, you definitely need to study Chaucer and Shakespeare and Hemingway and Steinbeck. Like, I entirely agree with that. But I think there should also be, at least one modern novel a year so that teachers can try and reach students by um, having characters that the students can relate to and having issues that are modern. There aren't a lot of books that are written, several years ago by Chaucer or Hemingway or something about like teenagers getting pregnant, teenagers having to go and support their family, teenagers with parents who are alcoholics and deal drugs or something. And there are kids in school who have those problems. So, you can go and you can have some sort of thing where a modern author could go and write a book about those problems and how a student, how some kid deals with that and what kind of effect the kid has and how the kid has to find a way to make that work. And there's a value to that. And I think that, in a way, modern authors can relate to and touch on different subjects that maybe students can understand better. I mean, I think teachers should take advantage of their positions in the lives of students and work for their betterment. It's kind of what teachers are for. Teachers are to help students grow and help make their lives better and help them become protective members of society. And just, teachers are there to help students. That's what it is to be a teacher. And if by reading a book written in the past 15 years, the students can more readily understand and connect to, can help even a few teachers reach a few students that they wouldn't have otherwise, then I think it's well worth that effort. On a personal note, though, reading Looking for Alaska really changed my life. Like, before I read that, I never really understood that books can be used as tools to communicate and teach people. Instead, I just thought that they were for fun. They were toys for me. And after I read Looking for Alaska, I really started to understand what literature was. Um, I needed to read a book that was written in a more modern context, but still had literary value. So something that was newer than A Separate Piece or The Chosen. Those are both about kids, but Looking for Alaska is more modern. And I needed to do that to understand that books could have an underlying message. Because the theme for Looking for Alaska is really easy to understand. Like the message and the great literary value in it, it's really easy to understand because it's written in such a way to put it right there. And then you can study it again and again and again, like I have. I've been studying this book for years because it's so amazingly mind blowing. And you can go and you can study it and you can get more meaning, which, you can do the same thing with reading Jane Eyre. So I think there's a value to that. But I needed to read that book to understand that books had an underlying message. I needed to be able to relate to the main character in order to understand that message. And because I understood that, I was able to understand for the first time why we spent so much time studying and discussing books in school and looking at their literary value and why people made a career doing that. So just beyond just changing how I viewed every piece of literature that I have ever read before or since, Looking for Alaska also helped me to understand people and the value that they play in each other's lives. I learned the value of establishing and maintaining emotional connections, even if you sometimes get hurt and lose the people you care about. Which I think is a really, really important lesson that some people need to learn, especially teenagers. Being a teenager is so hard, and it's so easy to say, well, I'm just going to go and write it off and hide in the corners of society because it's not worth the risk of losing someone and the effort to open up to someone. So I'm just going to hide off over here, which is what I was doing, which is why I was reading all the time. And then I just happened to read that book. And it is because I read that book that I really started to allow myself to open up to people and learn to trust people, which was one of the most scariest and hardest experiences of my life. But it has also been one of the ones that have most paid and that has paid the most off. So I really think that Tennessee made a mistake in banning this book. In beyond the fact that I don't think that censorship is okay. I mean, it's not porn. That's why you can go to a bookstore and buy it and not have to be 18. If it were porn, then it would have been published by a porn company and you couldn't buy it in a bookstore. But no, it's an award winning novel that is amazing and changes lives. And I do think that it should be taught in schools. And even if it's not taught in schools, it should at least not be banned. So that's my argument. Let me know what you guys think.